Sir, good afternoon. Can you see and hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
May I call Sir Geoff Mulgan, please?
Yeah.
Shall I do this? Good afternoon. I do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. As you know, my name is Jason Beer and I ask questions on behalf of the inquiry. Can you give us your full name, please?
Sir Geoffrey John Mulgan.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming to give evidence today. You've also given us a short witness statement, which is at WITN 0351 0100. Could you please look at the hard copy that's in front of you and turn to the last page, which is the fourth page? Is that your signature?
It is, yeah.
And are the contents of that statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
Thank you. I think you're currently Professor of Collective Intelligence, Social Innovation and Public Policy at UCL in London, is that right?
That's right.
And your first degree was in which subject?
Politics, philosophy and economics.
And I think subsequently you went on to secure a PhD, is that right?
In telecommunications.
And was that before the events that we're looking at in 1998, 99 and 2000?
Yes.
And was there a specialism within that discipline of telecommunications?
I mainly covered the technology and economics of networks of all kinds, in particular new internet-based networks.
So the computer side of telecommunications,
Yeah.
Rather than telephony.
Yeah.
Thank you. And what was your background before you became a special advisor in Number 10?
I had worked in local government, and I then went to MIT in America to study technology. I then was an academic back in London in telecommunications, and then set up a think tank in London called Demos.
And when did you become a special advisor in Number 10?
Straight after the election of May '97.
And what was your title when you were appointed special advisor? Who were you a special advisor to?
I was, special advisor to the Prime Minister. My field was social policy, social exclusion, urban regeneration, the welfare to work programme, things like that.
And what was your role as a special advisor?
It's a slightly unclear role. It was to help ensure the government was doing the right things, the policies were implemented, and in my case I was also involved in setting up various units like the social exclusion unit to create new capacities to do different kinds of tasks like tackling homelessness or neighbourhood regeneration.
You later took up a position as head of the Performance and Innovation Unit. Can you recall when that was?
So in 2000, after the various papers you've got here, I became a civil servant running the Performance and Innovation Unit from the summer of 2000, which later became the Government Strategy Unit. And then subsequently I also came back for a period running the Number 10 Policy Unit in parallel.
What did the Performance and Innovation Unit do?
It was meant to be a cross-cutting capacity to solve problems, work out strategies for the government on topics like energy or climate change. Indeed, we did the UK's first climate change strategy, policing, education, any topic where there was a cross-cutting task.
And how large was the PIU?
The PIU was quite small, but the strategy unit became bigger. At its peak, about 150 people. Half civil servants seconded in from departments and half brought in from business or academia, charities and elsewhere.
You say in paragraph 3 of your witness statement that in late 1998 you were asked to sit on the Horizon Working Group as a representative of Number 10. The inquiry's heard about different groups of people gathering together and such people styling themselves the Horizon Working Group. I just, before I take you to some documents, can you tell us your recollection of what this particular Horizon Working Group's purpose and function was?
Well, I can't quite remember why I was asked to sit on it, given I had colleagues covering DTI issues in Number 10 and another, which was Geoffrey Norris, and another Sharon White covering DSS. I think, in retrospect, I was probably asked to come in because I was more neutral and because I had a bit of a technology background. And this was a group set up by the Treasury to try to find a resolution to the situation and the conflicts between the departments, ICL and Post Office.
Can we look, please, at poll 302 8090? This will come up on the right-hand screen for you. And can we look, please, at page 4? Thank you. You'll see the heading of the document is Horizon Working Group Meeting, excuse me, 17th of September 1998. And we believe this is the first meeting of this iteration of the Horizon Working Group. You can see the membership of those intended to be present or who were present. I think this is a combined record of what was to happen and what did happen at the meeting. If we just highlight at the top of the page there that group of people that are mentioned to make it clearer, thank you. We can see that you're described under the heading number 10 policy unit. Had in fact in September 98 the policy unit been set up?
Yeah, the policy unit was set up in, I mean, it's always existed, or at least for 60 years, I think. And the then Prime Minister's policy unit started the day he moved into number 10.
And so that's different from the PIU, which we discussed earlier.
Yeah, that I took over later, nearly 2 years after this meeting.
And if we look at the next page, please, under discussion, about a third of the way down the page, the purpose of the working group and membership. It was agreed that the role of the group was twofold: to pull together various strands of work commissioned in the CST Chief Secretary to the Treasury's letter to Alistair Darling in the short timescale available to lead the work on the fallback options with the help of consultants. Did that accurately describe the purpose or the role of the Horizon Working Group as far as you can recall?
There are two differences I recall from this minute. So on the one hand, it said that BA and POCL were going to take part in it, and I don't actually remember them being at the meetings I was at of this group, but that may be my error. And it definitely did try to pull together a coherent position, a route through, and some fallback options, but I think as we'll get into later papers, I wasn't of the view there was actually a full exploration of fallback options. Other than that, it's accurate as far as I can remember.
We can see from these minutes, they go on for pages, I'm not going to take you through them, that you appear to have been there in mainly a listening capacity. I say that because there are very few examples of you being recorded as having made a contribution. Does that reflect the reality?
Very much so. So, I mean, this would have been one meeting of, 15 that day, others of which I was much more in the lead on, setting things up, initiating policies and programs. In this case, I was very much an observer, and as I'm sure you will all be aware, the complexity of the positions and the situation was pretty high, and it was pretty difficult to really get a handle on what was going on behind all the various papers and positions. So definitely I was more an observer at this point than anything else.
And what was number 10's role in the exercise or the project at this time?
It didn't really have a role at this time. This had been initially left to the departments and the agencies. Then the Treasury had come in because there was a major financial problem brewing, and number 10, I suspect it had almost no involvement prior. I mean, presumably it had done before 97 under the previous government when the PFI was agreed, but I've never seen those papers. And I think we only first became involved, this would be 14 to 18 months into the life of this government.
Can we turn, please, to poll 302 8091? And turn to the third page, please. This is a minute of the, or minutes of the second meeting of the Horizon Working Group, dated the 25th of September 98, so 7 days a week later. And again, we can scroll through them. I'm not going to do the exercise. Everyone's got the minutes available to them. Little contribution by you personally in terms of speaking. At this stage, was the work of the working group about, principally about seeking to bring to an end the dispute between two departments of state and a dispute between each of them and POCL and ICL?
Yes, I think so, yeah.
And so it was essentially about a negotiation, but also the preparation of contingencies.
Yeah.
Did this group, to the best of your recollection, ever consider issues relating to the technical integrity or robustness of the Horizon system as it was being developed?
So as I mentioned in my witness statements, one of my surprises in this whole process was how little discussion there was about whether the technology was on track, was fit for purpose, what the different options were. And in these meetings, there was at most ever one person with a tech background from CITU as then was. It was far more, in a sense, dominated by financial analysis of financial considerations, and the various advisors brought in from outside were mainly on the financial side. So in a sense, the tech issues were not on the agenda. And were not considered, and there wasn't the expertise in the room to have a proper assessment of them.
You say that it surprised you. The surprise was that there wasn't somebody or more people with technical expertise around this particular table.
Yeah, I mean, when a technology project is clearly running into problems, is several years overdue, and so on, in a way, the first thing you would want to know is it working, is it on track as a technology? And that is almost a prior question to the different NPVs and financial options. This was actually a much broader pattern within government at the time, and we may come on to this, it's in one of the minutes you've got from me later on. I was repeatedly struck how often decisions were being made in Whitehall without anyone in the room with really the detailed practical understanding of the topics being discussed. And this was particularly evident in relation to digital projects, of which there were many, and many very expensive ones, and most of which were not really working very well. So simply to see this as a financial negotiation seemed to me wrong, but my brief had not been to go back to first principles and examine the technology. It was essentially at this point just to see if a deal could be done to keep the show on the road.
And is that why you didn't raise the composition, membership and terms of reference of this Horizon Working Group to expand both to consider technical issues?
I didn't really have the authority to do that. It had been set up with the backing of various ministers, and as you identified, I was mainly there as an observer.
Even as the Prime Minister's special advisor, could you not go back to him and say there's a problem with this working group?
You may notice later on I did say to him I thought there was probably a problem with the technology which needed to be addressed. But I probably discussed at several points what was happening with Jeremy Hayward, who was then running his office. And there was a fairly clear message that the option of cancellation was not really on the table politically.
Who was that message coming from?
Well, this was, I think, Jeremy Hayward trying to reflect his understanding of the positions of different ministers and departments and the instincts of the Prime Minister. And therefore, the risk of actually going back to first principles and analysing the technology was you might get another 6 months or years delay and a further complication of already complex situation.
Through this work on the Horizon Working Group, did you gain an understanding of some of the issues involved in the Horizon project? Was that the main vehicle of your understanding, the only vehicle for your understanding of the issues involved in the Horizon project?
Well, we had no shortage of papers, and we had no shortage of sort of marketing materials, and then there was a lot of sort of gossip in the background, particularly of people in the IT industry, which didn't really fit what was in the marketing documents and these papers, and was much more critical and troubled. But nearly all of that was, as it were, off the record.
What was the who was the marketing material, as you've described it, from?
This was from, I guess, from ICL, showing, as many companies did at the time, a sort of a gleaming future of high-tech government, which ministers found very attractive.
And the gossip, as you've described it, from IT professionals in the background, who were they speaking to you directly?
Some spoke to me directly, but a lot of this was through informal channels and the trade press and elsewhere.
And what was that?
I did not have the time. I say this was a fairly marginal part of my work, so I didn't have the time to really get on top of any of that.
What was that other channel of communication telling you?
It was saying this was not only that the project and the program was running into difficulties, which was obvious, but also probably the technology was flawed in a more fundamental way, and not just specifics like the benefit payments card, but in other ways as well. But as I say, I didn't have the time, probably not the capability either, to really get into the detail of what was happening.
Can we move forwards, please, to December 1998? On the 9th of December 1998, you made a submission to the Prime Minister about the Horizon system, as I think it seemed that matters needed to be brought to a head. Can we look at that, please? It's CBO 0010 0001 underscore 072. That will come up on the screen for you. Thank you very much. You can see who it's from, you, and you can see who it's to, the Prime Minister, and you can see the copy list and the date, 9th of December 1998. And you say in paragraph 1, a decision now needs to be taken on whether to proceed with the Horizon project. You'll recall that this is the initiative to automate the post office network involving ICL. The project is nearly 3 years behind schedule, having been plagued with problems. Negotiations have been underway since the summer to find a way to continue the project. What did you understand by then to have been the plague of problems?
Well, I think any project which is 3 years behind schedule is clearly problematic, and as much as any issue I dealt with in Whitehall, this was one where there were different parts of government where really at loggerheads had diametrically opposed positions, which at that point were becoming more, not less, entrenched.
Did you understand the plague of problems to have included the integrity and robustness of the Horizon system as it then stood?
Yes.
Can we read, please, paragraph 2? The sums involved are big. Total spending through DSS contracts will be around £5 billion between now and 2008. 3, after a tough period of negotiation, ICL has made an offer which represents a significant move. Acceptance would still cost the government around £200 million more than previously envisaged. Equally, ICL would set to lose £270 million in total on the project. Their offer still leaves a significant gap with the government, £110 million on funding, as well as differences over the practicalities of implementation. But the Post Office will be prepared to meet the funding gap out of existing resources. And despite the continued opposition of the Benefits Agency, it will now almost certainly be possible to reach a settlement. Why was it your view at that point that it would be possible to reach a settlement, almost certainly?
So when I reread that, the fact I put the words almost certainly in very much surprised me, and that was probably a triumph of hope over experience.
Can you recall why you did put it in?
I think we must have just had a meeting in the day or two before that where it looked like there was a deal to be done.
Can we go over the page, please? However, paragraph 4, the decision is not clear-cut. The problems that have beset this project may well continue. Continuation would lock the government in for 10 to 12 years to what many see as a flawed system. Just stopping there, what are you referring to when you're referring to a flawed system?
Well, what we talked about a bit earlier, the clearly fairly widespread view that there were more fundamental problems with the technology as well as the specifics on the BPC and smart card and so on.
One way of reading a flawed system would mean that it's a flawed concept. Another might mean that it's a flawed execution of a concept which is good, i.e. the system itself is flawed as it is being developed and executed. You're saying this was meant as the latter? Well,
I had a view that some of the conceptual framing was flawed, and I think elsewhere wrote that the likelihood of any system of this kind quickly being superseded by change, becoming out of date, was high. And I'd probably spent maybe too much time in a more internet era Silicon Valley approach to technology, which favoured much more iterative, what they now call agile ways of working, where you try things out with users, rather than having very large-scale, hierarchical, long-term projects all designed without much involvement of the likely users. So that was in some ways the ethos, which I feared was a bit flawed, not only in this, but in a number of government digital projects at the time.
And just help us, what had your experience in Silicon Valley concerning IT, the delivery of IT projects involving the internet, told you about the involvement of users in the design and development of a project?
I think the main philosophy of software in that time, that era, was moving away from having very large and secretive teams trying to come up with the perfect model, which was then imposed on the world, towards learning by doing things in often less complete, less perfect, minimum viable products, and trying them out with the likely users to get feedback, and then spreading them out in an iterative, evolutionary way rather than a sort of big bang large project. And that was a almost philosophical shift which was happening at exactly this time, but took quite a while to really become normal in British procurement, which was still in that previous era, very large, and in a way much more of a big company approach to things rather than the perhaps more nimble, sometimes a bit messy approach of the Californian digital companies.
And so in this context, it would have involved involving the sub-postmasters as end users as at an early stage of the project, and designing a system that included features and facilities specifically around their needs.
Yeah, designing with them, co-creation is the kind of the spirit, which I think is obvious in many fields, and lots of digital innovation does that as a matter of course now. In some ways it's strange that it wasn't obvious then that that's how you should do a big project like this to de-risk and make it useful. If the users aren't involved till late on, it's likely there will be problems with the users. I mean, that's a fairly iron law of these kind of things.
Reading on, please, in paragraph 6, if we can highlight that. You say, in making a judgment, the following issues are paramount. One, the virtues of the project itself. Excuse me. Overall, Horizon now looks increasingly flawed. It's centred around a technology, the BPC, that's over-engineered and very expensive, and likely soon to be obsolete. Indeed, ICL acknowledged that the BPC will have no commercial value to them at the end of the project, although they remain underdeveloped. The alternatives, which involve simpler off-the-shelf banking technology, look increasingly attractive, offering a route to universal banking, automated post offices, and the better provision of government information. And so again there, Horizon looks increasingly flawed. Is what follows a description of the ways in which it is flawed?
Some of them, yeah. And so I probably didn't try to get into this almost more philosophical issue of how you do software, because that was not something my audience would have understood without a much longer discussion, probably.
You carry on in the minute highlighting issues at the foot of the page, the effects of the post office network, then over the page, please. Effects on ICL, effects on Fujitsu, effects on PFI, then over the page, please. Paragraph 7, you told the Prime Minister that the departments remain divided. Mr. Darling remains strongly opposed to continuing. Mr. McCartney for DTI will argue strongly for accepting a deal. Mr. Mandelson has largely kept out of the discussions. The Treasury is divided at official level, but Mr. Byers will probably on balance want to accept the deal for pragmatic reasons, even though he would prefer to cancel. And then you come to the analysis. At paragraph 8, please. At first glance, most of the factors point towards continuation. However, my view, which Lord Falconer broadly shares, is that although short-term considerations and expenditure point strongly towards making a deal, this will, in the long run, prove unsatisfactory, leaving the Post Office and government dependent on a hugely expensive, inflexible, inappropriate, and possibly unreliable system. Those words at the end there, possibly unreliable, on what evidence or information had you reached the view that Horizon was possibly unreliable?
I can't fully remember is the honest answer, but enough people had indicated to me, this people with technological knowledge, that at the very least it hadn't been proved, the opposite had not been proven, that it hadn't been shown that we had good reason to believe it would be reliable.
We don't see the suggestion of that type. That the technology, the system, was possibly unreliable in any of the submissions coming up from the DTI, either to the Treasury or to the Prime Minister.
Very little of the Whitehall documentation covered any of this. But
do you know why that was, that it didn't cover the technical issue that you were raising here?
A year or two after this, I was responsible for doing a big review of how government handled risk of all kinds. And a very common pattern in risk is that people low down the hierarchy spot problems and risks, but then it's filtered out as communication goes up to the top of the hierarchy. And I suspect in retrospect, this was exactly a case like that, where many of the people on the ground involved knew some of the problems and the flaws, but for different reasons, as communication went up through the many, many levels of very hierarchical organisations, the DTI, Post Office, DSS and so on, that got filtered out.
If we read on to the remaining paragraphs, in our view, I think that's yours and Lord Falconer's view, is that right?
At that point it was. I mean, in a way, I think if you can read between the lines of this note, my instincts were to recommend cancellation, but I'd been advised that was not a runner, so we had to recommend the best plausible option.
The best outcome will be a deal with ICL to continue with an automation strategy which drops the benefit payment card but focuses instead on helping the Post Office to provide banking services. This would enable a rapid move towards ACT and Post Office automation, but without the many problems associated with the BPC. It would also enable good relations to be maintained with ICL and Fujitsu. The cost to government and ICL resulting from the BPC could legitimately be blamed on the previous government. And so that was essentially your recommendation. Would that be right?
Yeah.
If we just look at the end of the minute over the page, please, to paragraph 12, just to get the options. You set out the options. 1, attempt to conclude a deal broadly along the lines offered by ICL. 2, seek a deal with ICL but excluding the BPC, recognising that in practice this may quickly lead to 3. 3, reject ICL's offer, move to terminate the project and press forward with an alternative. Do you wish to give a steer? We can see the handwritten note at the end of it. I wonder whether we could display that alongside WITN 0608, at 0100, page 3. WITN 0608 0100, page 3.
So do you want me to read?
No, it'll come up on the screen for us. WITN 0608 0100. It's Sir Tony Blair's witness statement. Well, there appears to be a problem with that. Can we have the document that we were displaying, in which case I will, with your assistance, try and decipher Sir Tony's handwriting. He wrote, I would favour option 1, but for Geoff's statement that the system itself is flawed. So he's picking up there, it seems, the point that you have raised in 2 passages in your note about the flaw to the system itself. Agreed?
Yeah, and he then says, surely there must be a clear view on this, but there wasn't really a clear view on this.
Surely there must be a clear view on this, meaning on whether the system itself is flawed.
Yeah.
But there wasn't.
He wasn't really given one, no.
No.
And I think it's, I don't know, this is a topic for an inquiry, but I repeatedly felt that he and other ministers were being put in impossible positions, making judgments on very complex commercial and technical issues on which they had no background. It'd be very unlikely they could, I mean, they have plenty of common sense, but is not a good way to make decisions.
How would they make decisions then? Impressionistically, relying on their common sense?
No, well, I came to this in the minute I wrote about 9 months later. Major projects need much clearer ownership, and the people in charge of them need to have technical professional expertise.
But in the absence of that, how were they making decisions, such as this one that we're talking about?
They were making decisions based on papers from civil servants who were perfectly intelligent, well-educated civil servants. But again, very few of the ones making the recommendations had any background in this kind of project. And those were then being fed into a political decision-making process by a significant number of different ministers who, again, had no background in very large, complex technical projects. And as I wrote in that minute later, and as I think many concluded more generally in British government, major projects have to be run in a quite different way, because if they come down to repeated, essentially, decisions by politicians and haggling by politicians, you really do risk ending up with worst case options.
He continues, surely there must be a view on this, i.e. Reading the enclosed paper, it all focuses, over the page please, on the financial deal.
But there the risks are pretty even, probably coming down on the side of continuing. The real heart of it is the system itself, which I think he's correct on.
And if you go back to the previous page, just above the IE at the foot of the page, he says, speak to me, does that say on Monday, on Mon? Was that a request for you to speak to him?
I can't remember who the me was in this case.
You had written the paper to him, but it was copied to a number of people in the top of the office.
Yeah, it could have been me, or it could have been Jonathan Powell, who was his chief of staff at the time. Anyway, you would agree that this is a plea or request from the Prime Minister
to be better informed about the technical aspects of the system
Yeah.
and whether it is indeed flawed.
Yeah.
Can we look at the formal reply that was received to this minute? CBO 709. You'll see that it's from Jeremy Haywood to you, dated the 14th of December 98. Prime Minister was grateful for your minute of the 9th of December. And would this be the normal way of communication back, that this was the official reply, if you like, from the Prime Minister through his principal private secretary?
It could be more often. I'd just be shown the handwritten commentary, actually.
And in circumstances where you did get an official minute back, would this be the operative minute?
Yes, but
Because we're going to see that what he wrote is not what is in this minute.
That's true. Yeah.
And so I'm wondering which carries the day.
Well, in a way, this one does. This is the official one, and in a sense, this is Jeremy Haywood in his correctly interpreting his role as trying to navigate and balance different Whitehall departmental interests.
Is that really the case, though? The Prime Minister says, I want to know more about the flaws in the system in order to make a good decision. And the late Jeremy Haywood writes a minute that doesn't mention it.
My guess would be he might have talked to Treasury about this, and they might have said, if you open up the technology, you will create more uncertainty and more delays. We're close to doing a deal, so whatever you do, don't do that. That's purely a guess.
In any event, he says the Prime Minister was concerned about your view the benefit payments card is over-engineered and is likely soon to be obsolete. That was, of course, only part of your concern, wasn't it?
Yeah.
His clear preference would be to avoid cancelling the project, but to go for a variant of your option 1 and 2. Again, that's not entirely what he said, is it?
No, not exactly.
No. We should retain the benefit payment card to seek to ensure that over time it delivers real benefits and provides an effective transition path to a satisfactory long-term position. If necessary, the Prime Minister thinks it may be sensible to give ICL a financial incentive to improve the BPC project in this way. This still, despite the differences, essentially has the BPC as an element of the system. Is that right?
That looks like it, certainly.
Thank you. Can we turn to a little later in the year, please? CBO 6011. This is your minute of 2 and a bit weeks later, Christmas Eve of 1998. And you will see that you say in paragraph 1, we've come very close to reaching an agreement on the way forwards. But ministerial changes yesterday made it impossible to reach final agreement. I think that's a reflection of, from memory, is that right, losing Peter Mandelson from government and a reshuffle accordingly?
I think, yeah, he resigned about then. Yeah.
Yes. The attached note from Stephen Byers sets out how we propose to proceed. In line with your instructions, our aim over the last 2 weeks has been to ensure that the government continues with ICL Fujitsu, whilst also avoiding the danger of being locked into an obsolete technology in the form of the benefits payment card. This has been broadly achieved. It's required considerable compromise on the part of DSS, some movement from DTI. The aim is to pursue a two-stage approach, and you set that out. And then if we can go over the page, please. You describe what's going to happen in the second stage in paragraph 3. You narrate your communication with Treasury in paragraph 4 and highlight the importance of bringing in somebody who's on top of the issue to play a coordinating role, probably Lord Falconer. Again, in that minute, there is now no mention of any of the technical issues being brought into account in making a decision on which option to pursue.
That's correct. I'm following instructions in a way at this point.
So the flawed nature of the Horizon system that you had raised in your previous minute, essentially now the caravan have moved on, is that right? Yep. Were you aware of any reports, audits or assessments by independent experts who had by this stage pronounced the system at that stage of its development to be viable, robust, or a design which would accommodate future technological developments?
I wasn't aware of such analyses, but I'm not sure I necessarily would have been aware. And my understanding was much of the technology was highly proprietary and not open to anyone to audit or assess in that way.
And by highly proprietary, do you mean not available for inspection and kept secret?
I think so, but I couldn't speak definitively on that. That was my understanding of the terms of the PFI.
Can we look, please, at CBO 708? And if we just look, this is a letter dated the 10th of December, just going back slightly, to Stephen Byers from Peter Mandelson. So Peter Mandelson was then Secretary of State for the Department of Trade and Industry, and Stephen Byers, who was still the Chief Secretary for the Treasury. Neither of them in those roles for that long at this stage. Now, this wasn't copied to you so far as we're aware or we can see, but if we look at the second page, last paragraph, Mr. Mandelson says that he is copying this letter to the Prime Minister. Can you see that?
Yeah.
And then if we look at the top of that page, page 2, Mr. Mandelson says there's still some way to go to complete the Horizon project, but the basic development work has been thoroughly evaluated by independent experts who have pronounced it viable, robust, and of a design which should accommodate future technological developments. Were you aware of anything like that, a pronouncement by independent experts?
No.
Can you assess how would this kind of correspondence be viewed within number 10? On the one hand, what Mr. Mandelson said taken at face value, i.e. there are such expert reports who are independent and who have thoroughly evaluated the system. He, Mr. Mandelson, knows something that we don't know, but we accept what he says. There must be something in the background. There are experts, he uses it in the plural, or viewed as a piece of advocacy.
This letter reads to me much more like a standard departmental advocacy letter, which he will have signed, but I don't think he'll have. I would be surprised if he had much involvement in it or interrogated its contents very much. It looks like a position paper in a period of Whitehall internecine conflict. And he's not someone definitely with a background in technology, and I suspect his senior officials at the time weren't either. So it's primarily it's more about positioning and getting a deal which works strategically for the department. But there must have been some experts. I'm sure that sentence would have been put in if there'd been literally nothing. But whether they were independent or not and where it was published, I don't know.
Can we turn back then to the formal response to your Christmas Eve minute, CBO 6019? Thank you. You'll see this is a minute addressed to you again from Jeremy Hayward, dated the 6th of January 1999. The Prime Minister was grateful to you for your minute of the 24th of December. That's one we've looked at. The Prime Minister thinks we should proceed as follows. One, we should indicate to ICL as soon as possible we want to have further discussions with them on how the BPC project can be developed to facilitate the earliest possible move to smart cards. Two, but we should also make clear to them that if agreement cannot be reached within a specified time period on a development of the current project along these lines, the government will stick with the current project. And then, notwithstanding two, the Prime Minister's clear that we should seek to move as quickly as possible to paying benefits directly into bank accounts via a smart card facility that can be used in post offices. So it's option one again, essentially, but a move away from the benefit payment card aspect of it.
Possibly or possibly not. It's a rather contradictory message, this one.
Well, Roman 2, would you agree, looks as if it is focused on what should be made clear to ICL Fujitsu, but then notwithstanding 2, that looks like a private plan as well.
Yeah.
In any event, the technology issue, the integrity of the system issue, isn't mentioned in this decision making.
No.
Moving on later into 1999, that can be taken down, thank you. In paragraph 5 of your witness statement, no need to bring it up, you say that your recommendations by them were summed up in a note to the Prime Minister in February 1999. For the record, the February 99 note is HMT 6029. No need to bring that up because it's essentially a staging post and things moved on afterwards. You also say in paragraph 5 that your recommendations were summed up in a further note in April 99 to Lord Falconer. I am going to ask in a moment to look at that April 99 minute. But before we get there, can we look at CBO 0010 301 _ 002? Thank you. It's a note from you to the Prime Minister of the 9th of April 99. And you attach a note for handling your meeting on Monday with Mr. Naruto, the VC of Fujitsu and chairman of ICL, who would be coming with Mr. Todd, chief executive of ICL, and Mr. Hall, their head of corporate affairs. Mr. Robson from the Treasury will also be there. The note has been prepared with the agreement of Mr. Mulgan and Lord Falconer. The meeting was originally requested by ICL as a courtesy call to talk about Durham and ICL Fujitsu's plans for continued expansion in the UK. The main topic will be Horizon. A good deal of progress has been made. A potentially viable deal is now in sight. Naruto will be seeking your commitment to reach a legally binding agreement by the 23rd of April. He'll threaten that Fujitsu will pull the plug if this doesn't happen, and that given the huge commitment that Fujitsu have made to the UK, they deserve better treatment. Without an agreement, Fujitsu will have to make provision for a £300 million loss in their annual accounts. This would wreck their plans to float ICL over the page. Your main aim should be to give a strong reassurance the government is keen to reach an agreement on Horizon, and you acknowledge the efforts that Fujitsu and ICL are making. However, it's vital you do not commit to reaching a legally binding agreement by April the 23rd. And then 6, to set the right tone for your meeting, you might wish to make the following points at the very beginning. I won't read all of those out. And then 8 at the bottom, you should be aware that Mr. Naruto was at your speech in Tokyo after you'd finished. He said to colleagues that Britain was very lucky to have had both a Thatcher revolution and now a Blair revolution in Japan, was still waiting for its Thatcher revolution. Now, in that minute, you referred to the Prime Minister expressing his appreciation for the efforts to help the workforce in Durham against a backdrop of very tough global pressures. What did that relate to?
I can't remember the details of that, I'm afraid.
Were you subsequently present at the meeting?
I don't think so, no.
In your witness statement, you said that the Prime Minister had a number of one-to-one meetings with Fujitsu and ICL. When you call them one-to-one meetings, do you literally mean that?
No. I mean direct meetings like this one.
I see, I understand. So not that there were no other people in the room.
I would be surprised if there were any one-to-one meetings.
Can you recall whether you attended any of those meetings?
I can't remember.
And can you say, can you help the inquiry with anything that was discussed or decided at those meetings?
Not really. My guess is the meeting probably transpired rather as I hoped it might in that note, which is, warm words, politeness, appreciation, but not giving ground unnecessarily at a moment of pretty intense negotiation.
Thank you. Can we move then to your April 99 note to Lord Falconer, CBO 6059? You'll see it's from you to Lord Falconer, dated the 20th of April 99. One, you and other ministers are meeting tomorrow to agree a final decision on Horizon. Since I'll be abroad on Wednesday and Thursday, I set out some considerations in this note. Two, desired outcome is that the meeting on Wednesday will confirm the route agreed at the meeting on Monday. Namely, send ICL a letter on Thursday with sufficient legal force in committing the government in pursuing the revised smart card-based Horizon to avoid them having to make provision for losses in their consolidated accounts. Can you remember that particular issue being raised? Namely, in the absence of such a letter of comfort, there was the prospect of provision needing to be made in Fujitsu's accounts.
Yes, and I think this was also raised in the letter you've got from the ambassador, that the scale of resources committed was very large, and the prospective revenues were fairly modest at this point. That was problematic not just for ICL's commercial future, but also for Fujitsu attempting to promote similar PFIs in Japan at the time. And without some plausible alternative route, some route to implementation of the project and future revenues, then there would be a large hole in their accounts, which would be deeply embarrassing for the leadership of the company.
In the second bullet point, you say, you speak of the need to, quote, set in train a radical overhaul of POCL to introduce new management and to incentivise them to maximise the returns from Horizon. Why was a radical overhaul of POCL through the introduction of new management needed?
Well, at the time, it didn't appear that POCL really had a very clear business strategy. I mean, they obviously can blame aspects of that with the nature of the PFI deal or the behaviour of ICL Fujitsu, but they were surprisingly unable to articulate to others, including myself and in Treasury and elsewhere, a sense they really knew they had a clear 10, 20-year strategy of how to transform, make sustainable POCL as a whole, and make use of all these new technologies. And that was one of the, I think, the concerns all the way along, was whether they actually had the correct leadership.
You say in your witness statement that a key part of the problem was a leadership within the Post Office who were not quite equipped to lead on this major transformation of their work. Does that sum it up?
Yeah.
We move forwards, please? You tell us in your statement that in May 99, you wrote an internal note on some of the longer-term lessons to be learned out of the Horizon project. Can we look at that, please? It's CBO 6060. Now, apologies that this is a photograph of an email that is itself taken from a file from within the National Archives. It seems from other evidence that the inquiry has got that you prepared something more formal, that something more formal was dated the 20th of May 1999, but we do not have that document. There's a reference to your document of the 20th of May 99 in CBO 6057. No need to turn that up. But what we do have is it looks like thoughts before that formal draft, 8 days before, namely the 12th of May 99. Can we look at the first paragraph together, please? With the possibility of a deal on horizon, it is important that government learns lessons to avoid anything like this happening again. Horizon has been a disastrous project from beginning to end. It was misconceived. It may sound an obvious question, but does that represent your global view of the Horizon project contemporaneously expressed in May 99?
It's a personal view, clearly, at this point, and slightly intemperate in its language, but probably not a million miles from the truth, from being accurate.
It's faced continual delays and problems. Over the last year, it's taken up huge amounts of ministerial and official time and delivered, in the end, a far from optimal solution that may be as expensive of the alternatives and will almost certainly offer less. This note sets out 8 basic lessons. When you referred in there to a far from optimal solution, did that include your knowledge that the technical reliability and integrity of the system was questionable?
Yes.
Or, as you described it in the earlier memo I took to you, it was a possibly unreliable system?
Yeah.
Paragraph 1, I think, speaks for itself. Paragraph 2, I look at in slightly more detail. Fallbacks. In the case of any large project of this kind, it's essential to prepare serious fallback options. Although number 10 demanded fallback options last autumn, no further fallbacks were subsequently developed. Having rejected the main option, the government has therefore effectively had to sign up to an alternative option on which very little work or serious costing has been done. Was it your view that government effectively had to sign up to this alternative option?
Well, this was the option B1. A fair amount of work was done on it, but it was more done on the financial modelling rather than the really developing a serious alternative option. So obviously a huge amount had gone into option A, if you like, and then a dramatically less work was done on what became an alternative option B1, as a result of which all the numbers in it kept changing because they were flimsy. I think that's what I was trying to say there.
In terms of having to accept this alternative, had you been informed about concerns within the Post Office that under the PFI contract, the Post Office had been denied by ICL access to information, documents and data about the high and low level design of the system, which meant that they were being given what was described as a black box, effectively being instructed to trust the supplier to deliver the outputs according to their specification? Had you been told about that?
I was aware of that, and in fact I commissioned about a year or two later a review of PFI, and this was, I think, one of many flaws in the design of PFIs in the 90s, which was perhaps reasonable for things like building projects, but definitely didn't work for complex IT projects where you needed, in my view, much more direct engagement and collaboration of the company, the user and the provider. And this definitely was a problem. The recommendations on PFI reform, which was, I think, probably a year or two after this, were at first greeted with great hostility, but I think nearly all of the recommendations later implemented to change it.
When considering the options, was it ever raised with you that the new bilateral contract between ICL and POCL presented an opportunity fundamentally to change that point, to reset POCL's entitlements to see such information, such documents and such data?
That there should have been that discussion, and I think we should also have commissioned a proper technology review, which we didn't do. So both of those, in retrospect, are discussions which should have happened that spring, but I don't recall either happening.
And why didn't they happen?
Because I think most involved wanted to go for the line of least resistance and get a deal done. I think there's often the case when there's pressure to do a deal, things have been delayed. It's a sort of natural human psychology to want to avoid making things complicated and renegotiating fundamental principles, which would then make it harder to get a deal. And in a sense, that's just a symptom of the larger feature of this kind of situation, sort of sunk cost fallacy, as economists call it. When you've put a lot of time into something, you try very hard to keep it alive, even if the rational decision is to cut your losses.
Thank you. If we can just go back to the document, please, at paragraph 3. And expand paragraph 3. It will always be hard to give public enterprises true commercial freedom, but it can't be right for ministers and generalist officials to have to make decisions about extremely complex commercial and technological strategies. At the very least, more transparent methods are needed for offering independent advice to ministers on the quality of business plans they're asked to support. In the case of Horizon, although consultants have been used at various times, at the key moment of decision, proper advice was missing. What was the key moment of decision?
Well, I guess there was more than one, but in all the various documents you've been looking at, there were moments of decision either to go ahead or change or cancel. And at those moments, in my view, the key decision makers, not least the Prime Minister, weren't getting good independent advice. I couldn't provide it. This was, a tiny part of my time, and I don't have deep expertise on complex tech projects.
What are you referring to there that the advice was missing at the key moment?
I think it must have been the various discussions in April, some of which you've mentioned, which were including the one where the meeting with Mr. Naruto was alongside.
And then on to paragraph 5, please. You say if ministers cannot reach agreement on a project with public spending implications, it's vital that at an early stage the Prime Minister and Chancellor set the parameters for reaching a decision. The worst possible outcome is for the PM and Chancellor to become involved at the very last moment without having had time to master the issues. Are you describing what in fact happened in this case there?
Yeah, so what happened was in, I guess, February, March, April, the working group and with the involvement of Lord Falkner and others were trying to find a way to make things work, what became called option B1, which would have involved additional public spending, but with the hope or the analysis that new revenues would come through the post office from other services and so on. So in the long run, government would, as it were, break even. The Prime Minister was willing to support that, but then at the last moment, the Chancellor basically intervened and was not willing to support the additional short-term public spending that would have required.
Hence the last-minute involvement that you mentioned here.
Yeah, and so I don't. It's not either their faults. I mean, he was again doing his job in the way he didn't have much choice at the time, trying to protect, the public purse. But it's not a good way to make decisions. This minute, I think, was intended to be a note to Sir Richard Wilson, who was then Cabinet Secretary, to try and prompt a more formal civil service analysis of what had gone wrong, what could be done differently in the future in relation to big projects of all kinds, commercial freedoms, and IT in particular.
And then lastly, on this minute over the page, please. Information, point 6. Far better procedures are needed to tie down basic facts. Almost every supposed fact in this project has turned out to be unreliable. What were you referring to there?
These were mainly the financial facts, where we were given, and if you read in detail the minutes of the Horizon Working Group, most of the key numbers changed almost month to month.
Thank you. And then lastly, in terms of the decision that can come down, can we look at CBO 6053? A letter from Jeremy Hayward to the Chief Secretary's office. So I think that's the Chief Secretary to the Treasury Office. Is that Mr. Monnery that Dan referred to there?
I guess so, yeah.
The Prime Minister was grateful for the Chief Secretary's minute of the 10th of May. He's discussed this with the Chancellor, who set out in more detail the Treasury's concerns about signing up to B1. It will be a leap in the dark, said the Chancellor. It was not clear, for example, what discussions had taken place with the banks on the viability of this option. Moving on, we needed more time to bottom these issues out. Against this background, the only sensible course of action, paragraph 2, would be to buy more time to consider all the options. The most rational option would probably be termination. How widely was that view held within the top of government, that the most rational option would be termination?
Not very. I think it probably was the view of a majority in DSS, and within Treasury there were, I think as I wrote earlier, a range of different opinions.
The next paragraph, the Prime Minister said he had not had time to look into all the options in detail. Starting with a clean sheet, it's doubtful whether we would want to devote substantial new resources to a project that appeared to be designed largely to prop up the post office network. However, we were not starting from a clean sheet. He was content for the Chancellor to go over his concerns in more detail. Any solution should meet 3 key political requirements. 1, he did not want a huge political row with the post office or the sub-postmasters lobby claiming the entire rural network had been put in danger by the government. 2, we should not put ICL's whole future at risk. And 3, it would be important to ensure the government had a fully defensible position vis-à-vis the Public Accounts Committee. So is this essentially handling the issue to the Chancellor to resolve?
Yep.
But putting some political parameters around the decision-making?
Yes.
Those factors there, would you agree, all appear to relate to how the deal might look to the outside world?
Well, I think how the deal, what the deal would be, what its material effects would be, as well as how it would be perceived.
At this time, to your knowledge, was the technical robustness or reliability or integrity of the system brought into account in decision making?
No.
Thank you very much. Those are the only questions that I ask you. I think there will be some more, starting with, I think, Ms. Patrick or Mr. Maloney on behalf of a group of sub-postmasters. So I think there's a reasonable prospect we can finish Sir Geoff's evidence shortly, which is why I've carried on.
That's fine, yeah.
Thank you.
So the usual question, can you see and hear me?
I can.
Thank you, sir. Sir Geoff, I've only a very few questions to ask you. And the first is really to try and jog your memory in respect of the briefing that you wrote for the Prime Minister on the 9th of April of 1999. You were taken to that document by Mr. Beer when he asked you questions. Could we possibly go to that document, which is CBO 201 401 underscore 002. And if we could please go to paragraph 6. And if we could highlight paragraph 6. You may remember, Sir Geoff, that Mr. Beer asked you about the points that might be mentioned at the outset of the meeting in order to set the right tone. And 4 points are there. Firstly, the deep appreciation of Fujitsu's continuing commitment to the UK. And then the next one that Mr. Beer asked you about was how much you appreciated the efforts to help the workforce in Durham against a background of very tough global pressures. And you couldn't remember what that was, and I don't criticise you for that. Obviously, it's 24 years ago now. And but just to try and assist with your memory, if I may, and see if I do assist, could it be a reference to the closure of the Newton Aycliffe plant by Fujitsu in the Prime Minister's constituency in late 1998?
But that's all I can remember, and I think I mentioned it in one of the earlier minutes as a consideration. But beyond that, I was not party to the to and fro on it.
But that is what's that's what it refers to.
So it's County Durham, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I make no criticism of that lack of geographical specificity either. That of course it's County Durham, and just if you are able to help, Fujitsu was a major employer in this sector in the UK at the time, wasn't it? And indeed, that's there in your third point, that you recognise that the UK has virtually all of Fujitsu's European investments, and even more investment than the US.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to forget 25, 30 years on just how important all of the Japanese inward investment was to the UK and especially the North East.
Yeah. I mean, if I was to suggest, and I could take you to a document if necessary, but just to save time, that Fujitsu had over 14,000 employees in the UK at this time. That's about right in your recollection.
If you say so. I can't remember the number. Yeah.
Right, thank you. Well, that's all I ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I think that's all of the questions for Sir Geoff, unless you had any.
No, I have no questions, and I'm very grateful to you for coming to give evidence this afternoon, Sir Geoffrey. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and as I apologise, my recollections are limited on a small part in a truly appalling story. And if there were things we could and should have done differently in 98, 99, 2000, then it's really important the right lessons are learned. So I wish you well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're just going to bring the inquiry to a close now. Sir Geoffrey, I think we're back tomorrow morning at 10 a.m, sir.
Yes, and have I got it right, Mr. Beer? We have 2 witnesses and 2 oral submissions.
Yes, that's correct, sir.
Fine. See you all at 10 o'clock.
Thank you very much, sir.